Hello and good morning. I'm Holly reporting to you live from Kalkine Studio in Sydney. It's the middle of the week, so let's keep up the momentum with a glimpse at the Australian share market opening trades, along with the global and domestic drivers of the market. You're watching The Opening Bell. The ASX opened higher on Wednesday after a strong closing of three major stock indices on Wall Street. The US stocks surged in overnight trades while a heavy sell-off in the previous session was seen, as fears of investors over rising COVID-19 cases eased. It looks like the upbeat earnings report by companies also added to the confidence. And while the Dow Jones rose 1.62%, the S&P 500 gained 1.52% and the Nasdaq Composite added 1.57% as well. In the currency space, the US dollar surged to a 3-month peak as investors moved towards safe assets amid ongoing volatility. The riskier assets globally have come under pressure recently, and many countries are struggling to contain the outbreak of the fast-spreading Delta virus variant. The situation is raising fears that further lockdowns could hit economic recovery. Closer to home, the most populous state, New South Wales, is battling the largest COVID-19 outbreak, with total cases exceeding 1,400. And onto the yields now, and the benchmark 10-year note has plunged almost 30 basis points in 1 week. Investors were convinced that data for June showed the biggest jump in US consumer prices in 13 years was short-lived. And one crypto coin may have lost its shine in a separate scale of investor risk appetite. Bitcoin fell below $30,000 for the first time since June 22nd. And while looking at the Australian market open trades, the top performing stocks in this index were engineering and construction services provider CIMIC Group and rare earths player Lynas Rare Earths. Then natural resource company Orocobre and health insurer NIB Holdings also advanced. Meanwhile, Altium, Domino's and Elders were the bottom performing stocks in the ASX 200. Plus, gold players St. Barbara and Evolution Mining dipped on the board. Moving on, let's glance now through the ASX sectoral charter. Well, Australian energy players Beach Energy, Santos, Origin Energy and Oil Search traded in the green zone amid an oil price uptick. Crude oil futures rebound on Tuesday as market participants traded heavily in the commodity space after oil hit its 2-month low on Monday. Brent crude settled up 73 cents or 1.1% after slipping 6.8% on Monday. It'll be interesting to evaluate whether suppliers face the strain to keep up with world demand, or the market will witness excess oil supply following OPEC's decision. It's still uncertain as to how the end of 2022 may give a different direction to the oil price movement, as OPEC intends to completely end production cuts by September of next year. And now onto the miners space, where it looks like there's winners all round. Heavyweight miners Rio Tinto and Fortescue Metals traded higher amid an uptick in iron ore prices. The most traded coking coal futures on the Dalian Bourse for September delivery rose as much as 3.2%, the highest since May 13. Coking coal futures settled up 2.0% as well. And as per the latest update, the world's biggest miner, BHP Group, dipped on reviewing its petroleum business. It's considering its options to exit its oil and gas business that might accelerate its retreat. Then in the yellow metal space, Newcrest Mining, Evolution Mining, Ramelius and Gold Road edged lower amid the gold price softness. Gold remained primarily subdued in a volatile trade on Tuesday as the dollar strengthened. And now it's time for a short break, but stay with us and I'll be right back with more updates for the Australian share market. Tune in to stay updated while on the move.
We will tell you where the crypto craze has reached,
Where the property market is headed next.
what the world is doing to become more environmentally friendly.
Apart from tracking the daily market charter.
Be on top of the latest news and announcements
With Kalkine TV. Welcome back from the break. I'm Holly, your host, live from Kalkine Studio, and you're watching The Opening Bell. Let's have a quick look now at the highlights of the prominent ASX stocks under the spotlight during the early trades. To kick it off, Service Stream soared on acquiring Lendlease Services, a national provider of the telecommunication, utilities and transportation sectors. Australia's leading provider of essential network services stated that the $295 million acquisition will be partly funded by a fully underwritten $185 million equity raising. The acquisition is set to be completed by November of this year. And next, cloud-based communications platform Whisper rose on reporting annual recurring revenue growth to $53.6 million as of the 30th of June. That being said, the company sustained an operating loss of $3.3 million in the financial year of 2021, clocking sales worth of $46 million. And on to the next stock under the radar. Engineering and construction services provider CIMIC Group rose despite their earnings update. Its revenue climbed 10.5% to $7 billion, but the net profit saw a decline to $208 million from $317 million a year ago. The group has maintained its financial year 21 profit guidance after reporting strong group revenue in its first half of the financial year 21. And one energy player is fully challenged indeed. Oil and gas explorer and producer Beach Energy traded up on a 7% uptick in its quarterly revenue to $421 million. The company's fourth quarter sales revenue rose 7%, and it was supported by a 10% increase in the realized oil price. The company's production for 2021 financial year came in at the top end of guidance. It said its underlying earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization was also expected to be at the top end of guidance. Then investment company 1 Long Short Fund rose on registering an 8.8% increase over the quarter against the benchmark's 8.3%. The Absolute Return Fund has been able to extend its one-year return at the portfolio level to almost 73%, massively outperforming the market's 28%. And jumping onto the newsmaker under the spotlight, e-commerce giant Kogan.com rose on sales recovery in June of this year over April and May. The company reported a 23% growth in adjusted earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization over the last year, while the revenue was up by 56%. Next up, solid news from mining and metals player South32, whose share price increased on reporting a record annual production, with several of its projects beating the company's guidance as well. Zinc production at its Cannington project increased by 14% on a year-on-year basis, while its production ramped up at South Africa manganese mines by 21% from the previous year. The company also expected to report pre-tax impairment in its financial year 2021 results of $993 million for its Illawarra metallurgical coal business. And lastly, the mining space brings in another home run as gold miner Perseus Mining rose on beating its production guidance by reporting over 191,000 ounces of gold production for the first half of financial year 21. This is compared to the guidance of reduction between 175,000 to 290,000 ounces of gold. Well, that's just about all for now, but we'll be bringing you more trending updates in our upcoming shows during the day. Stay tuned with Kalkine TV for more live market updates across economies, markets and sectors. Holly Shields signing off.